I've been thinking about this whole situation, and honestly, I still can't wrap my head around how everything fell apart so completely. 20 years Graham and I had been together. 20 years since I first saw him walk into our high school photography club. This awkward new kid who didn't know anyone in town. I was the one who made him feel welcome, showed him how to use the dark room equipment, included him in our group. Even back then, I knew I was out of his league. I mean, I had guys asking me to prom left and right, but there was something about Graham that felt safe, stable. Maybe that should have been my first red flag. We managed to stay together through college, even though we went to different schools, spending hours on the phone every night, writing these long emails about our classes and dreams. I remember my roommates always commenting on how dedicated I was, how lucky Graham was to have someone so loyal. And I was loyal, completely, utterly faithful. While other girls were out experimenting, having their fun, figuring out what they wanted, I was already committed, already planning our future together. When we got married 10 years ago, I thought I was making the right choice. Graham was successful, dependable, and he worshipped the ground I walked on. But lately, I'd been having these thoughts about everything I'd missed out on. I mean, I gave him my 20 seconds, my prime years, when I was at my absolute peak physically. Do you know how many women would kill to look like I did at 25? And what did I do with it? Played house with the first guy who showed me attention. The whole thing started when I began thinking about legacy, about what I wanted my life to mean. I was 38, successful in my photography career, but something felt incomplete. I even talked to Graham about freezing my eggs just to keep options open, and he was supportive. I'll give him that. He encouraged me to join that expensive gym downtown, said I deserved to invest in myself. What he didn't expect was what I'd find there. Sloane, Piper, and Quinn changed everything for me. Sloane was this gorgeous married woman in her early 30s who seemed to have it all figured out. Successful husband, beautiful home, but she still made time for herself, still knew how to have fun. Piper and Quinn were in their early 20s, and being around them reminded me of everything I'd missed. They were so free, so unapologetic about enjoying their youth and beauty. When they invited me out for drinks after our work classes, I felt this spark I hadn't experienced in years. The first few times were innocent enough, just dinner and a couple of drinks, talking about life and relationships, but then it evolved into actual nightlife. Real bars with music and dancing and men who looked at me like I was something special. I forgot what that felt like, having strangers notice me, compliment me, buy me drinks just because they found me attractive. Graham looked at me like furniture at that point, something familiar and expected. These men looked at me like I was a prize. I started going out with the girls every week, sometimes twice a week. We called ourselves the Gilded Swans in our group chat, and honestly, we lived up to the name. I was keeping up with women 15 years younger than me, turning heads everywhere we went. Sloane always said I was the most beautiful one in our group, and coming from someone like her, that meant something. Of course, Graham started getting weird about it. He'd make these passive-aggressive comments about how much I was going out, how late I was staying up, how I seemed different. Like that was a bad thing. I was finally coming alive again, finally remembering who I was before I became his wife, and he saw that as a problem. We had this huge argument one night where he basically tried to forbid me from going out with my friends. Forbid me? Like I was a child instead of a grown woman who'd been supporting herself and contributing to our household for years. "You're going out too much, Eliza," he said, standing there in our kitchen with his arms crossed like some disappointed parent. "Every week, sometimes more. You come home smelling like alcohol and cigarettes. You sleep until noon the next day. This isn't normal behavior for a married woman. Normal behavior. Like there was some handbook for how married women were supposed to act, and apparently having friends and a social life wasn't in it. I'm having fun with my friends," I told him. "I'm sorry if that threatens you, but I'm not going to apologize for finally having a life outside of this house." "It's not about having friends," he said, and his voice was getting that whiny tone that made me want to scream. "It's about respect. Respect for our marriage, for our relationship. You're acting like you're single. Acting like I'm single." The words hit me wrong because honestly, sometimes I forgot I wasn't. When I was out with Sloane, Piper, and Quinn, when men were buying me drinks and telling me how stunning I looked, when I was dancing and laughing and feeling beautiful, In those moments, I wasn't Graham's wife. I was just Eliza, and Eliza was magnificent. That night, I promised him I'd stay home. I said I understood his concerns, and that I'd text the girls and cancel our plans. But as soon as he went to bed, I found myself getting angrier and angrier. Who was he to tell me what I could and couldn't do? Who was he to make me cancel plans with my friends because he was feeling insecure? I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw a woman who was still incredibly beautiful, still vibrant, still young enough to enjoy life. And I was supposed to waste that sitting on the couch watching television with someone who took me completely for granted. I put on my black dress, the one that hugged every curve perfectly, and called an Uber. If Graham wanted to control someone, he should have married a different type of woman. I texted the girls that I was coming after all, and Sloane responded immediately with excitement. Yes, girl. We're at Vespers and there are so many cute guys here. The bar was packed, music loud, energy electric. I felt like I was stepping into a different world, one where I belonged. Piper and Quinn immediately started gushing over my dress, and Sloane introduced me to some of her other friends who were out that night. Within minutes, I had a drink in my hand and 3 different men trying to get my attention. That's when I met Julian. Tall, broad shoulders, this confident smile that made my stomach flip in ways it hadn't in years. He approached me while I was at the bar ordering another drink, leaned in close so I could hear him over the music. I hope you don't mind me saying, but you're absolutely stunning, he said. And the way he looked at me made me feel like the only woman in the room. Can I buy you that drink? We talked for over an hour. He was charming, funny, successful, some kind of consultant who traveled for work. He listened when I talked, asked questions about my photography, complimented my intelligence along with my appearance. When was the last time Graham had done any of that? When was the last time Graham had made me feel interesting, desirable, worth pursuing? When Julian suggested we go somewhere quieter, I didn't even hesitate. I texted the girls that I was leaving, and Sloane responded with a winking emoji. And get it, gorgeous. I felt so alive, so free, so much like the woman I was supposed to be. His apartment was nice, sophisticated, nothing like the suburban mediocrity I'd been living in. We had more drinks, talked more, and when he kissed me, it felt like waking up from a long sleep. Everything about it was electric, passionate, real. This was what I'd been missing, what I'd given up when I tied myself down to Graham at such a young age. This was the life I deserved to be living. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little bit. If anything, I felt vindicated, like I was finally taking something for myself after years of putting everyone else's needs first. When I got home around 3:00 the morning, Graham was asleep and I was grateful. I took a long shower, washing away any evidence, and slipped into bed, feeling more satisfied than I had in months. The next morning, I couldn't wait to tell the girls about my night. Our group chat was buzzing with questions, and I gave them every detail I could remember. Well, almost every detail. I couldn't actually remember the guy's name, which was embarrassing, but the girls thought it was hilarious. Honestly, I felt bad at first, I typed, but as soon as I walked in and saw him, I didn't care anymore. Graham's trying to control the wrong person, and honestly, I'm too beautiful to be faithful. Sloane responded immediately. Yes, Queen. You deserve to live your life, Piper added. About time. You've been tied down your whole life. And Quinn, I can't believe you never had a hoe phase. Most women get that out of their system in their 20 seconds. They were right. I had been tied down my whole life, committed to one person since I was basically a teenager. I never got to explore. Never got to use my beauty the way most women do. I'd wasted my prime years on someone who didn't even appreciate what he had. I keep thinking about how I never really got to use my beauty the way most women do, I continued. Like, I'm still gorgeous, but I wasted my absolute peak years being a good little wife. The validation from my friends felt incredible. Finally, people who understood what I was going through, who supported my growth and self-discovery. Graham had been acting strange that morning, quiet and distant, but I assumed he was still pouting about me going out despite our argument. His problem, not mine. I decided to go out again the next night. Why not? I'd opened a door to a new version of myself, and I wasn't about to close it because my husband was having some kind of insecurity crisis. The girls were excited to hear about my adventures, and we made plans to hit a different bar somewhere with an even better crowd. Graham was being weird when I got ready to leave, hovering around like he wanted to say something but not quite having the courage. I looked incredible. I'd spent extra time on my makeup and chosen a dress that showed off my best features. When I caught him staring at me in the mirror, he looked away quickly, probably wondering how he'd gotten so lucky and how long he could keep me. The second night out was even better than the first. I felt confident, radiant, like I was finally living the life I was meant to live. Men approached me constantly, buying me drinks, complimenting everything from my smile to my intelligence. I danced until my feet hurt and laughed until my cheeks ached. This was what I'd been missing, what I deserved to experience. When I came home around 2:00 the morning, Graham was waiting for me in the living room. The lights were on, and he was sitting on the couch with this strange expression on his face. I could smell alcohol on my breath, and I knew I probably smelled like the cologne of the various men I'd been dancing with. But so what? I was an adult who'd had a fun night with friends. "What's up?" I asked, kicking off my heels and trying to gauge his mood. He just stared at me for a long moment, then held up my phone. My stomach dropped, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. "Do you really think you're too beautiful to be faithful, Eliza?" The way he said it, repeating my own words back to me, made them sound different, harsher. But I wasn't going to apologize for being honest about my life. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "Did you really waste your prime on me?" he continued, his voice getting louder. "Do you really wish you'd had a hoe phase so bad?" He'd read everything. Every message in our group chat, every honest thought I'd shared with my friends. I felt exposed, violated, but also defiant. Those were my private conversations, my safe space to process what I was going through. "You went through my phone?" I asked, trying to turn this back on him. "That's a violation of my privacy, Graham." But he wasn't backing down. "Where were you 2 nights ago? Who did you go home with?" I just stared at him, not sure what to say. Part of me wanted to lie, to deny everything, but another part of me was tired of pretending, tired of acting like I was happy in a marriage that had become a prison. "Nothing happened," I finally said. But even I knew how unconvincing it sounded. "Nothing happened?" His voice was getting shaky now, emotional in a way that made me uncomfortable. "You texted your friends about how you couldn't remember his name, Eliza. You bragged about cheating on me." When he put it like that, it sounded terrible. But that wasn't how it felt when it was happening. It felt like freedom, like finally taking control of my own life. I started to cry, not because I felt guilty, but because everything was falling apart so quickly. This wasn't how I wanted him to find out. I wanted to be the one in control of the situation, the one who decided when and how to address our problems. "I need you to pack your things and leave," he said, and his voice was cold now, distant. "Tonight, I'm calling you an Uber, and you're going to your mother's house." "Are you insane?" I asked, the tears stopping immediately. "You're going to throw away 20 years over one mistake one night." But he was already moving, pulling suitcases out of the closet, throwing my clothes into them with no care for organization or delicacy. "Get dressed," he said. "Something appropriate for going to your mother's house at 3:00 the morning." I couldn't believe this was happening. Normal couples worked through infidelity. Normal husbands didn't just throw their wives out on the street over what was essentially a meaningless encounter. I tried to reason with him, to explain that it didn't mean anything, that I was just going through something and needed his support, not his judgment. But he wouldn't listen. He packed my things with mechanical efficiency, called the Uber, and waited by the door like a bouncer. When the car arrived, he carried my suitcases out himself, not even letting me say goodbye to our home properly. The ride to my mother's house was surreal. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering what kind of domestic drama he'd gotten himself into. I wanted to explain that my husband was having some kind of breakdown, that this wasn't normal behavior for rational adults, but I couldn't find the words. My mother was shocked when I showed up at her door in the middle of the night, crying and carrying suitcases. I told her Graham and I had had a fight, that he'd overreacted to something minor and kicked me out. She made up the guest room and promised we'd talk more in the morning, but I could see the questions in her eyes. A week later, a process server showed up at my mother's house with divorce papers. Graham was serious about this, actually planning to end our marriage over one night of indiscretion. I hired the best lawyer I could find and prepared to fight. I deserved half of everything we'd built together regardless of what had happened. I'd contributed to our household, supported his career, been a good wife for 10 years. One mistake didn't erase all of that, but apparently, Graham had been planning this strategically. He'd hidden assets, consulted with lawyers, built a case that painted me as some kind of serial cheater who'd been deceiving him for months. My lawyer said it would be difficult to prove otherwise, especially with the group chat messages as evidence of my mindset. I tried everything I could think of to reach him, to make him see reason. I sent long text messages explaining my perspective. Drove by our house to see if he'd be willing to talk. One night, I parked across the street at 3:00 the morning, hoping to catch him coming home, but he must have seen me because the police showed up 20 minutes later. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. Graham's lawyer was ruthless, presenting evidence of my harassment and unstable behavior. They made me sound like some kind of stalker instead of a woman who was fighting for her marriage. The judge was harsh, ruling in Graham's favor on almost every point. I lost the house, most of our savings, even had to sell my car. Years of building a life together, and I was left with almost nothing. After the divorce was finalized, I found myself at a bar downtown, drinking alone, and thinking about how completely my life had fallen apart. I'd lost my husband, my home, my financial security, all over one night that was supposed to be about finding myself. In a moment of weakness, I called Graham's number, not really expecting him to answer. He picked up on the third ring, and for a second, I thought maybe there was hope. "What do you want, Eliza?" His voice was tired, distant. "I just wanted to tell you that my life is trash now," I said, the alcohol making me more honest than I intended. "Everything is completely ruined. You made your choices," he replied. "I have nothing else to say to you." The line went dead, and when I tried calling back, it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling from different numbers. Even had my mother try calling him, but he'd blocked us completely. 20 years of history, and he'd erased me from his life like I never existed. Sitting here now looking at how everything unraveled, I still can't understand how it all went so wrong so quickly. Maybe I made some mistakes. Maybe I could have handled things differently. But did I really deserve to lose everything? Did one night of poor judgment really warrant the complete destruction of my life? People keep telling me I should feel guilty, that I should take responsibility for what happened. But it's hard to feel sorry for finally standing up for myself, for finally taking something I wanted instead of always putting everyone else first. Yes, the consequences were more severe than I expected, but that doesn't mean I was wrong to want more from my life. I gave Graham my best years, my youth, my complete loyalty and devotion. When I finally did something for myself, something that made me feel alive and beautiful and free, he couldn't handle it. Maybe that says more about him than it does about me. Maybe I'm better off without someone who would rather destroy everything than work through our problems together. But late at night, when I'm alone in my tiny apartment, struggling to pay bills and wondering how I'm going to rebuild my life at 38, I sometimes wonder if it was worth it. That one night of feeling desired and free, was it worth everything I lost? Was proving to myself that I was still beautiful and desirable worth losing the security and stability I'd built over 20 years? I don't have an answer to that question yet. All I know is that I can't change what happened. And I can't make Graham see that what I did came from a place of pain and confusion, not malice. I was drowning in a life that felt too small for who I was meant to be. And when I finally tried to swim to the surface, everything collapsed. Maybe someday he'll understand that people make mistakes when they're desperate, when they feel trapped and unappreciated. Maybe someday he'll realize that throwing away 20 years over one night was an overreaction that hurt both of us more than necessary. But probably not. Graham always was stubborn. Always saw things in black and white with no room for gray areas or human complexity. So, here I am starting over at an age when I thought my life would be settled and secure. It's terrifying and overwhelming, but maybe it's also an opportunity. Maybe this is my chance to build the life I actually want instead of the one I fell into when I was too young to know better. Maybe losing everything was the price I had to pay for finally being honest about who I am and what I need. I just wish it hadn't cost me so much.